welcome to another look of Alan Wake 2. So a month ago we had a look at the settings of Alan Wake 2 and we had a look if we could get the game running in 4K at 60 FPS. Well, we could, but without ray tracing. So in this video I will have a look at those ray trace settings, see what each setting does and see if they are worth enabling. And also, should you use Ray-Reconstruction? Can I pronounce Ray-Reconstruction every time correctly, or will it become an mess? Well, welcome to Angus Gaming, guess who I am, and let's go back to Bright Falls once more. Now let's start off with a quick recap of the previous video. So the initial best settings with RT off, so higher than the high preset, but at 4K DLSS performance, was running around 72 FPS, at least in this scene. Then the optimized settings with RT off got you about 90 FPS, so a nice improvement without sacrificing too much in graphical detail, if I say so myself. Then turning on ray tracing at the high preset, we go to around 53 FPS. Coming from that 90 FPS, it's a decrease of about 41% in FPS. That's quite a lot, so on a system like this, 4K 60 with ray tracing enabled won't really happen. So let's dive into those ray trace settings and see what each of these settings do and if they really improve the graphics. Well, spoiler alert, of course they do, but how much? Usually I show you optimized settings, but for ray tracing I don't really think there are optimized settings. It all depends on what you want and how much performance you have left to spare. But well, usually after those optimized settings I ask you to like the video, but there is no way to do that now because of how the video is structured and the integrity of how it all comes together. Thanks for sticking with Angus Gaming. Please leave a like if you liked the video so far. Now let's quickly dive into those ray trace settings. And at the end of the video, I'll give you my advice. And we'll start off with direct lighting, which mostly impacts shadows. So with ray tracing off, from the side, shadows look fine. But when moving around, you'll notice that when looking straight at a shadow, the shadow can be less wide than the actual object is. So the lantern and the fire hydrant's shadow are way too narrow. Turning on ray tracing, or ray trace direct lighting, solves this issue. So direct lighting takes care of shadows being cast, but you have some options here. You can turn on direct lighting with ray reconstruction, or turn on direct lighting but leave ray reconstruction turned off. Doing that, you can choose to set direct lighting denoising levels. Low and high are the options there. So direct lighting with ray reconstruction has great looking shadows, but it seems to run worse off all the direct lighting options. Turning on direct lighting with ray reconstruction runs about 28% worse than when you leave off direct lighting. But well, those great shadows, you want to have those, right? Also, turning on ray reconstruction automatically set post-processing to the high level. Well, with using my optimized settings as a base it doesn't really matter, but it's good to know if you weren't using my optimized settings. Turning off ray reconstruction then and setting direct lighting denoising to low, you will get the highest FPS and lose only 21% in FPS. However, this way the shadows are fixed, but the yellow light doesn't really seem to be cast on the street. It's straying a bit too much from the original image, I guess. And you can fix that by setting the direct lighting denoising to high. That restores the yellow light being reflected on the street with a loss of 27% in FPS. Now notice that the shadow on the ray reconstructed image are a bit sharper looking than the ones on the direct lighting with the denoising quality, even the high denoising quality. But don't ask me which one looks more realistic. I'm afraid I'm not a real shadow expert, which is weird because I've finished Alan Wake and all the DLC, so you would expect I am a shadow expert, but unfortunately I'm not. And also, only after watching a video of benchmarkings for a while, he mentioned that ray reconstruction is a DLSS feature, so it will only work on an Nvidia card, something I almost forgot to mention in this video. But well, luckily I haven't forgot, and now you know. And thanks for a viewer from last video, Kaylee, for mentioning that channel. I'll put a description in the channel if you're interested, but of course I hope you will keep watching Angus Gaming as well. Okay, moving on. I did find that turning on direct lighting fixes some of the weird looking shadows, so for example the red thread shadow on the investigation board in Saga's Mine Place. This may seem trivial, but you're looking quite a lot at this board, so the thread having a correct shadow is a nice detail. And then also when in a forest area where we had a bit of that flickering shadows from the trees. Although with the high shadow quality it's not that bad, it's looking great with direct lighting enabled. And now we're moving on to Ray-Traced Transparency. Here we have the settings off, low and high transparency. And I only enabled transparency here for the ray trace settings, so all other ray trace settings are still disabled. Now at first glance I would say low looks fine, so use the low setting, only costing you about 12% in FPS. But to be honest, high doesn't cost that much more compared to the no ray tracing. High only costs you 13%, so that's 1% more than the low setting. The reflections on high look a little bit sharper than on low, I think. You can see it when looking at the Deerfest flag in the reflection, but this probably isn't something you're really going to notice. However, if you want to play with only ray trace transparency enabled, make sure you choose high, because looking around in the diner with the low transparency enabled, you can notice some noise in the paintings over here. Are those paintings, or are it just framed banners? Well, anyways. And it's that kind of noise that I find immersion breaking in games, especially in a game like Alan Wake 2, where the whole setting should be realistic and you're looking at details in the world around you to see if you can find some clues. That way you'll notice noise like this more easily. At least I think you'll do, being the detective that you are. The cult of the noise. You'll get them, I'm sure of it. High transparency then. This completely, or well, almost completely fixes that noise issue. So if you are only going to enable transparency, make sure you enable high ray trace transparency. You can still see some noise if you really look for it, but it's way more sporadic. Now, enabling Ray-Reconstruction, that completely removes any noise. But you cannot enable just Ray-Reconstruction and transparency. You will also have to enable or direct lighting or path traced indirect lighting. So keep that in mind. But if you already were planning on using multiple items of ray tracing anyway, then I guess it's good to know that you can live a noise-free existence. Or can't you? And for some reason, when you enable ray trace transparency, the shadow resolution will be locked and you'll get the high quality, no matter what the grayed out setting shows. Guess Remedy doesn't want you playing with nice reflections and ugly shadows. Now these transparency settings create nice looking reflections on big water surfaces like a lake or something, let's say Cauldron Lake for example, or of course on glass surfaces like the diner windows. Puddles on the ground, however, are taken care of by the path traced indirect lighting setting. So with only ray trace transparency enabled, you'll still have screen space reflections on puddles on the street. So let's move on then to that path traced indirect lighting. And then we have a bunch of options again. Off, low, medium and high. And again the option to turn off Ray-Reconstruction or turn it on. When path traced indirect lighting is turned off, you'll have screen space reflections, so the clouds in the sky, for example, aren't reflected when looking down. When turned on, you will see the sky reflected in the puddles, as well as the building, the American flag and you name it. Reflections look a little bit sharper with each step you set the setting higher, but even at low I think these reflections look great. Turning on this setting will cost you about 38% at the low level, 39% at medium and 40% at high, so I would say go with the low setting, but it could be that light is less accurate on the low level. We'll have a look at that in a moment. See it as the training of your detective skills. Next to a noise detective, you'll be a light detective as well. And well, maybe you'll be the next Saga Anderson of graphical details. Now all these settings levels were checked with Ray-Reconstruction on. Let's have a look at Ray-Reconstruction and why you should use it or not. Looking at Ray-Reconstruction turned on with path traced indirect lighting at the low setting. I think reflections in the puddle in the middle of the street look okay. Not nearly as sharp as the one near the pavement, but okay, it's oily, filthy street water I guess. Now if we disable Ray-Reconstruction and move around, I think the shadow becomes a blurry mess. Also, they seem to be moving for a little while after Saga has stopped moving. I find that quite annoying. Sure, we're running 5% higher in FPS, and if you don't have an Nvidia card you really don't have an alternative, but I think we should use Ray-Reconstruction. Turning the denoising quality up to high, I don't think we see that much of an improvement. The reflections get updated a little bit quicker, but still when moving around it's a blurry mess. So if you have an Nvidia card, again, use Ray-Reconstruction. If you don't have an Nvidia card, I'm sorry, but you're stuck with a bit of blurry mess. But it's not all bad. Not all reflections look this blurry, of course. Those reflections at the side of the street were still looking okay, and still, okay, looking very good. So definitely it's worth to turn on Path Traced Indirect Lighting with low denoising, I would say. One thing Ray-Reconstruction together with Path Traced Indirect Lighting do mess up is the lamp in Saga's Mine Place. This won't happen with Ray-Reconstruction turned off or with Path Traced Indirect Lighting turned off, but turning both on, yeah, you can throw that lamp in the trash. Now in the meantime, I finished Alan Wake 2 and I found no other issues with Ray-Reconstruction enabled. It's just this lamp for some reason. But well, Path Traced Indirect Lighting, we currently only looked at reflections, and well, based on the settings name, I thought I had to look at bounce light on other surfaces, not reflections, so let's do that. And here I must say, even with Path Traced Indirect Lighting turned off, Remedy's engine Northlight does a great job of a kind of software Path Traced Indirect Lighting. If you have a look at the red hue shining on the window frame behind the seating area, it has a nice red glow. Now turning on Path Traced Lighting, even at the low level, does quite a bit to the scene. Shadows under the car outside are more accurate. The red hue on the window frame is a little bit brighter and reflections on the floor are improved and the overall lighting is just better. So let's put off and the high setting next to each other so you can have a look at a bit more detail in the scene. So when Path Traced lighting is enabled, the reflections of items on the table are improved. The wall is better lit with light coming in from the window, and even the window frame itself got better lit. So quite some improvements, but at some cost of course. And of all the ray tracing settings, if you do not want to enable them all because of performance, this is the last one I would enable. But there are quite a few puddles throughout the game where the reflections of course are much better, and the reflective surfaces like the floor here, there are a lot of things this setting helps improve and make the game look really a lot better, I think. But well then, I guess we arrived at my recommendations. Playing the game with ray tracing turned off is still a viable way to play the game of course, and the game really looks great even without ray tracing enabled. But if you want to have more detail, I would say start with turning on direct lighting. It will remove those sometimes flickering shadows and improve shadow quality overall. If you still have performance to spare, turn on Transparency. It will make all windows and glass surfaces look way more realistic, but also some puddles in the woods I found, as well as large surfaces of water. Make sure to put Transparency at the high level of course if you're not using Ray-Reconstruction. And if your PC is still not suffering enough, enable Path Traced Indirect Lighting. It will make lighting look a lot better and add non-screen space reflections in a lot of places, which will look way better. I think you can enable these settings at the low level, these still look very good. Now to get this all running at 60 FPS, I needed to go as low as 1080p to get a solid 60 FPS. I must say, even at 1080p the game looks great, and well, maybe at 1080p you have headroom to up the DLSS or FSR level of course, going from performance to balanced or maybe even quality. However, when playing on a 4K TV like I am, I do think the image is pretty soft looking, so I chose to play this game at 30 FPS at 4K. I think Alan Wake 2 lends itself pretty well to playing it at 30 FPS, especially if you're playing with a controller like I am. So consider that. Now Alan Wake 2 doesn't have an FPS slider in game, but use the Nvidia app, so you can easily set the game to 30 FPS and turn VSync to adaptive, so that's half the refresh rate. Latency is on the high side, almost around 100 milliseconds, but I still found it very playable. And that is it for Alan Wake 2. Thank you for watching, as always, of course. Now, in the meantime, I'm done with the game and I really get why it got those high review scores from critics. It's a really cool game with really unique twists and things and mechanics and stuff like that. So, really cool, check it out. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video on Alan Wake 2 about the normal optimized settings we used as base settings for this video, go have a look at that video. And then I've created an Instagram account. Go follow me over there. I hope it's a way to more easily send me a message or get into contact with me or just have a look at what I'm playing at the moment or maybe what my next video will be about. Well, anyways, thank you for watching again and I'll see you next month. Houdoe!